Hello, everyone. My name is Angela Ferrell-Zabala. I am the Executive Director of Moms Demand Action. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's discussion in Everytown's leading Black gun violence prevention champions on the Campaign Trail series. This discussion will be the last of our virtual conversation series, but if you missed the previous conversations, you can go back and check them out on Everytown's YouTube channel. Today, I have the distinct honor of speaking with one of the newest and toughest members of the U.S. House of Representatives. In addition to being a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated, she represents the 30th District of the state of Texas. Welcome, Representative Jasmine Crockett.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So, Representative Crockett, you've been involved in Texas politics and organizing for a while at this point, but thinking back to when you first started, what actually motivated you to run for office?
Yeah, so the part of the story that most people don't know is my first race was when I was 28 years old. And at that time, I was working as a public defender in East Texas. And I was frustrated because I felt as if justice was not treated equally. It just kind of depended on who you were and what families you came from, whether or not you would really experience real justice. And so at that point in time, I actually ran for district attorney because I knew that the power lied with the person that could actually make decisions about whether or not you actually were charged with something or not, or whether or not you went to prison or not. And so I really had a passion to kind of do that. I won the early vote, lost on election day, and thought I will never be involved in politics again. I was like, that was too much work. And it was so hard to get that $7,000 I needed to run. And
A lot, a
I was like,
lot.
I am done. But obviously, God wasn't done with me because I can't really better explain how I ended up in the U.S. House when I look back and see where I was when I was 28 years old.
Well, it's incredible. At 28, I was not doing anything close to that. It is a lot of work. And yes, God is looking out for you. There is a plan. So for this year's Black History Month, Everytown's uplifting the work of Black gun violence prevention advocates that help build this movement. And that makes me think of the late and great Congresswoman Eddie Bice Johnson, who passed away back in December and was the outspoken champion for gun safety. You're now serving in the seat that she held. Can you tell me about the legacy she left behind and how you're building on that legacy?
Absolutely. So our district is actually the most densely African American populated district in the state of Texas. And when you think of an African American district, while Black folk are not a monolith, when you think about the communities overall and some of the struggles that you see, it doesn't really matter if we're talking about a Black community in Michigan or a Black community in Illinois. Overall, there's a lot of similarities when we start talking about some of the struggles. One of the struggles, as someone who's done criminal defense work, is just crime overall, right? Whether it's drugs, whether it's gun violence, no matter what it is, there's kind of these commonalities. And so what I felt like we always got with Eddie Bice Johnson was someone who understood the economic implications that would come along with some of these struggles that we would see. And so for her, she focused a lot on infrastructure because she thought if we can make sure that the infrastructure is here, then the jobs will come and people will have more opportunities and we can reduce some of what we see as relates to any kind of crime. So that was one of her big pushes. And then with her being a nurse, she absolutely was thinking about just the overall health implications, right? Whether it was mental health or otherwise. She was actually a psychiatric nurse. And so when you think about what happens when you potentially are in an environment that is plagued with things such as gun violence, what's happening to those children, what's happening in those domestic relationships that are struggling with these types of things. She was really committed to making sure that people are being healed, not just physically, but mentally. And so I think that that's one reason that she decided that this was an angle that she needed to take because we know the harm that can be left mentally on people when we think about gun violence.
Well, that's really important. I think oftentimes when we think about, like you said, the gun violence in this country, we just think about the act that happened. Someone was shot, maybe someone was killed, but we're not thinking about the trauma and how that kind of lives on in community. So that's really incredible to lift up. I'm sure that, like myself, the people watching might not really know what goes into running for office until they decide to actually do it themselves. So what's one or two things that you discovered about running for office that completely took you by surprise?
The amount of money it costs. So,
Yes.
I mean,
$7,000 you said to get you on there to start out, which
yeah,
is
well,
not
that was
a
when
big
I
deal.
was running for DA, and clearly I wasn't successful. I thought I was doing a lot when I raised the $7,000, but no, the amount of money that it takes and the amount of time that it takes for your message to get across, right? So people believe, oh, if I go on social media and I make a video, and even if that video goes viral, right? We've had some of these campaign ads come out and they have these viral videos and they think, man, I've made it. And it's like, no, 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 no. Like the vast majority of the people that live in your district did not see that, right? And so you have to inundate people with information because people are struggling to keep a roof over their head, trying to make sure that they're keeping food in bellies. They're trying to make sure that they're keeping gas in the car. And so if you really want to get through to people, then it doesn't mean that you send one mailer. You got to keep mailing and keep mailing. You got to keep calling. You got to keep texting. It costs a lot of money. And you also believe that because you're a rock star in your mind, that everybody else will naturally recognize that you're a star too and say, let me join that campaign team. And that is just not true. That is not true. Again, people are focused on other things. And I think part of it comes down to people truly understanding the power that you do have if they put the right person in position. Because a lot of people think, you know what, if I vote for this person, no matter what I'm voting for them for, then my life is going to change tomorrow once they're sworn in. And it doesn't work that way, right? Like having realistic expectations, but having expectations of this is what a congressperson can do. If we want to see gun legislation that is transformative, is it a matter of it just being taking effect in Michigan that has their blue trifecta going on? You know, how is it that I can get that in my state as well, right? Like federal laws is truly what we need to change. And so getting people to better understand exactly what you do. Because what I found is that most people vote for the people that they like. Don't
That's
really
right.
matter what you're running for, right? Like they're just looking for your name. They vote for who they like. And sometimes they don't fully understand what it is that that person can or can't do for them. So I get phone calls about everything because they're just like, well, we calling Jasmine. I'm like, I appreciate the calls, but I'm like, guys, I can't do anything about the fact that you need that light fixed. Like that's not my lane. So, you know, also not really understanding that people really just vote for the people that they like. And, you know, thankfully my district likes me. Hopefully they will like me even more for this reelect, but
We
nevertheless,
love you.
they liked me enough to send me here so that I could at least have this first term.
No, that's fantastic. And, I think a good point is raised. Election is not where it stops, where it ends. That's just the beginning to elect someone in. And then also making sure that people understand the power that they have. We have to put work into and work, in unity to get things done. So I appreciate you lifting that up. So when you're out there on the
Wait a
campaign,
minute, I'm gonna stop you real quick.
sure, go ahead.
I'm gonna just add to that and make sure I put in an amazing plug for y'all. Listen, we see the red shirts. I remember being in the State House chamber, and this was when we were trying to fight against open carry in the state of Texas. And the state of Texas brought open carry about right after, it was the immediate session after the shooting in El Paso. And they decided, you know what we should do is we should just give everybody guns. And when I tell you that I saw those red shirts, I knew it was on and popping, right? And so listen, it does matter to make sure that when you say I'm seeking an endorsement or you say that you're going to actually accept an endorsement, that you understand that it's a partnership. It's not about just that moment in time when you're trying to get elected. It's this enduring relationship. And I'm happy to say that we do have that type of relationship, that I know that if some stuff is going down, I know how to call in backup. I know who's going to show up in their red shirts,
We got you.
be exactly where they need to be. And just like I knew what it was when I saw y'all, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle knew what it was. And so I just wanted to make sure that I highlighted that, because I am eternally grateful for y'all's your continual advocacy and support.
Thank you. Well, that partnership is critical to us, and we love your leadership and will continue to support. So when you're out there on the campaign trail and you're talking to young voters in particular, how does gun violence prevention fit into the issues that they care about? I'm a mother of four. I don't know if you know that. And my two oldest are twins and they're 22. And we have these conversations as much as we can. But they're not necessarily thinking the way we're thinking. So what are you seeing, or what are the ways that it's coming up, gun violence prevention, how it fits into what they're caring about right now?
It's huge. I would say it's almost tied for first. I don't really know how to rank environmental issues, repro, and guns, but
Yeah.
the three of them are top of mind for young people at all times. And when I say young people at all times, I mean all young people. So one of the things that I'm really passionate about is I typically will go into schools of all age ranges. And I do a deal where I create a House and a Senate, and I pick a little president. And so we do this elementary all the way up to college kids because I want them to better understand what our jobs are. And so I don't tell them what type of legislation it is that they need to create. I always say, hey, I break it down. I tell them what they can do. They can either create legislation or they can change a school rule. It doesn't really matter to me. What has been so striking is that no matter what age group I deal with, guns is always the one piece of legislation that not only is brought up, but it always passes. And so I always tell them, if I could just trade y'all in for my colleagues, we have progress in this country, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
itty bitty babies, I'm talking about the lowest grade that I think I've done this with is second graders. From second grade through college, this is the one piece of legislation, no matter what, I always get. And so I remember after doing this a couple of times, I wondered and I questioned, how is this possible? And I thought about it, and I always give this talk after we go through the process. If they do this piece of legislation, which they all have, and I talk about the fact that when I was growing up, I never had to do an active shooter drill. That was never a thing. But right now, when you say a young person, there isn't a young person that has not had to do an active shooter drill. It has become a part of their lives. And so it is top of mind for them, unlike us, right? And so I think that that's why, and I never give them parties. I never give them parties. They never are asked to be of a specific party. They are asked to argue both sides. And it is interesting to see them struggle sometimes to argue against something that they truly don't believe. And it usually comes up with the guns. And I just did this most recently with fourth through sixth graders, I think they were. And I remember they felt so ashamed of arguing against guns that as soon as they got done, making their argument, they were like, Congresswoman, we really don't believe this, but you told us that this is what we have to do. And they knew to parrot the Republican talking points. They were like, oh, it's all about the Second Amendment. Like they were literally like they have heard this nonsense, but it is amazing to see their passion. We definitely have to make sure that we record this one time so that y'all can see it because it is one of the most beautiful things to experience in the sense that sometimes you can be in a place like this and question yourself and say, am I the one that's crazy?
Right.
And
That's right.
then you walk in and you're like, no, I'm not the crazy one, right? Because the kids are on my side. So no, I'm not the crazy one. But it is top of mind for all young people of all ages. They really do want to get the guns off the streets. They don't like living in fear. They don't like that every time they walk into a room, they're trying to evaluate whether or not there's a closet because that's something that they're taught in active shooter drills. Like going back to the mental health conversation, these children are living with a level of stress that I just didn't know. I mean, we had metal detectors at, our public high schools at some point, just in case somebody brought weapons and things like that. But that was as far as it ever went. It wasn't what it is now.
Yeah, it's a new level, like you said, and not at all surprising that the passion was showing up with those young students you were working with. I mean, this is the leading cause of death for kids and young adults in this country, and it shouldn't be. It's not an inevitability. This is not a natural disaster. It's not childhood cancer. this is something that we can fix. And I think that's what's so frustrating for you and I. But you spoke about second graders. My almost 8-year-old, who's in second grade now, for Christmas did her Christmas list, or before Christmas. And one of the things she put on it was that she wants to do more, or figure out how we stop the problem with guns in this country. And this is what she put on her Christmas list. So I hear you loud and clear. And that's why we both are getting up every day and doing this work, because our young people are impacted by it. So we know that gun safety is more than just a political issue to run on. It's life-saving, especially when we think about the Black communities who are most impacted. Can you tell us a little bit about your vision for how gun violence prevention could play out in Dallas and Black communities across the country?
Yeah, I mean, this is a quality of life issue, right? You know, I know you specifically asked me about Dallas, but the first thing that I think about is the first and only drive-by that I ever experienced. And I was 7 years old. And my grandmother lived on the South Side in Chicago. And I know Chicago gets this bad rap, and they're like, oh, there's so much gun violence. I'm like, bro, like, it's been a long time, right? We didn't have social media, and maybe it wasn't as highlighted, but like, this has been a thing. And
Yeah.
so in Chicago, they have all of these basketball, like outdoor basketball courts. And my older cousins used to love to play basketball at the courts. So they would take me sometimes if I was in Chicago. And I remember I did not know at the time that I was experiencing a drive-by. I had no idea. The noise that I heard, me being so childlike, I was like, oh, it's firecrackers. Like, it was the only thing that I had ever heard was like firecrackers, basically. And so my cousin, he like jumps on top of me, and I was like, get off of me. And I was like, why are you on me? And I thought he was playing. And then he said, when we go home, don't tell anybody about the fireworks. And I was like, oh, but it was loud, and it's not even 4th of July. And I went home, and my cousin got in trouble for sure. Because of course I told, because I didn't think that I thought it was fireworks. So I just wanted to talk about it. And so, yeah, he was like, I'm never taking you anywhere with me again. But nevertheless, I say all that to say that the childlike innocence that I had protected me. It protected me mentally. And I think that reality is not allowing children's innocence to kind of take over. And so, but for me having that childlike understanding of what happened, I don't really know how that particular situation would have affected me overall in my development and my growth. And so I do think that we have to be smarter about prevention overall. And this is someone who is licensed to carry and has firearms. I'm a real Texan at this point. But I remember being on the House floor again while we were dealing with permitless carry, and I received an alert on my phone that a child had just died in a car right north of my state house district. And that child had died because their parent had a gun in the vehicle, in the glove compartment, or it was in the middle. I don't remember if it was a console or glove compartment. And the baby got the gun while the mama was in the store, and it wasn't properly, the safety wasn't on and things like that. And the baby ended up killing itself. And so, it's the simple things. It's making sure people have the education. It's making sure that we are properly storing firearms. There are those that believe that if you're a Democrat, your only answer is to get rid of all guns. And that's not what we're saying, especially with the proliferation of guns in this country. I don't know how we can ever get all of them off the streets. But we can be smarter. We can decide that we don't want any more Uvaldes. We can decide that assault weapons are just out of bounds. We can decide that if we are going to have certain weapons of war, that at a very minimum, 18 years old just isn't old enough, right? Like, it's thinking through this, because the fact that a state like Texas says, you know what, you're too immature to have a cigarette, so we're going to raise the age from 18 to 21. But when it comes to, say, an assault weapon, you can get that at 18, no problem. Like, it doesn't make sense. And for some people, especially, again, going back to the mental health, because my friends on the other side of the aisle love to blame every mass shooting on mental health. Yet they continue to defund mental health. They don't want to make sure that mental health providers are available in the schools. Like, you can't have it both ways. You can't blame it on a problem and then never, ever offer a solution to that problem or any other problem. And so, there's a lot that we can do, whether it's just making sure, obviously, I did criminal defense work. There were certain clients that never should have their hands on guns for a
Yeah.
lot of different reasons, right? Again, we can go to the mental health aspect, or we can just talk about the violent nature, right? So there's a lot of things that can be done that come short of taking everyone's firearm out of their homes, which is nothing that has ever been advocated for. It's just about being smart. It's just about being safe. And it's about making sure that it's responsible gun owners and a matter of what type of firearm does that responsible gun owner have? And is this a matter of protection or is this a matter of something else? So there's things that we need to do, and it's to help every single one of us, even those that believe that they aren't affected by gun violence. The numbers don't quite work in your favor. The numbers are that we all are affected by gun violence in some way or another.
That's 100% true. It's a public health crisis at this point. And this note about mental health that you brought up, I just wanted to make the point that when that comes up, one of the first things I go to is the fact that we're in this country, we're not the only country that has people that have issues with mental health, but we are the only country that has a problem with gun violence. So we need to think about that and stop scapegoating mental health and really invest in things that will help people, right? When we think about trauma and healing and mental health, and not just look to that alone. So, Representative, you spoke about being a gun owner yourself. So this question is perfect. I want to hear more about the importance of expanding the gun violence prevention movement to gun owners. Like how can we be doing that? Why do you think that's important? I think you said a little of this, but what are some ways that we could be doing this? Because we don't believe that it's a contradiction to be a gun owner, person that owns firearms, and wanting common sense gun safety laws.
Yeah, I think that because there has been this rhetoric around who it is that's seeking to be smart on gun violence, and it's usually the face of that, at least in the minds of most people, isn't a gun owner. And so I think that it adds to the credibility of what we're fighting for when it's an actual gun owner that's advocating for these changes. And in that terrible bill that was passed, one of the things that they said they wanted to get rid of was the licensing requirements. I am licensed, which meant that I was trained. It meant that I was educated. And I think that education is invaluable. And I think that that's what it is for gun owners to come out and say, this is a really smart thing to do. Because I think we are looked at as people that truly have experience with firearms. And I think it's just harder to write us off. So I think that, like any other movement, you have to have a wide coalition. A lot of people talk about the civil rights movement and they talk about the Black folk in the movement. But if you talk to any of those civil rights leaders about the movement, those people that were actually there in the fight, they will tell you the importance that our white allies played in that movement, right? And we see it even nowadays where people will try to challenge something that I say as a Black woman if I start talking about Black issues as if it's not credible. But for some reason, they may listen in a little bit if a white ally parrots what I just said. And so I do think that this is another type of situation that is akin to that, where it just allows more people to be willing to listen because it is somebody that actually owns a firearm.
Yeah, it's an authentic voice. So yeah, that's really helpful. So when it comes to voter turnout, I want to hear more about how Everytown and other organizations, because this is a big election year, can do a better job of engaging people who are gun owners.
Yeah, so I think that it's just a matter of like going and talking to people. Like, I think that specifically saying, hey, gun owners, right? And making sure that you're specifically targeting them. Just like, there's always a targeted impact that y'all have and a targeted, I don't want to say agenda, but a targeted effort when it comes to definitely moms, moms that have been affected with gun violence, whether they lost their child or their child was significantly harmed in some way. I think that y'all can do the exact same thing with gun owners, right? Where you're basically sending out a SOS and say, hey, you have a home here too, making it clear that this is a big tent because you are on the right side of history. The numbers are clear that most Americans want some common sense gun reform. So it's not a matter of just those suburban moms or inner city moms or anything like that, but it's gun owners as well, and really telling them, listen, we've got some over here. Some are elected, some are not, and having gun safety events, I think, is another option, where it's meeting the moment right there, because it's like, well, you're not doing like the other side sometimes does when it comes to like repo and say, hey, you know what? Never mind. Just get rid of 6 ahead, right? Like, it's like, no. We want to educate you. And so if you have these events where you're teaching about gun safety, I think that also welcomes people to say, okay, well, wait a minute. Maybe we should listen in and see what they have to say.
Well, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask one last quick question, and then we're going to wrap this up because I know you are a busy woman and we really appreciate your time today. So this one might be difficult, but I want to hear from you.
Delta is the best organization ever.
How'd you read my mind? I wanted to say, I wanted to ask, what is your go-to? Because this is hard work. I mean, you've been in this fight for a long time now. You're a leader with us on this issue. What is your go-to song that inspires you or hypes you up or calms you down? What do you go to? Give me a little something here.
So for me, it's been Break My Soul by Beyonce. Yeah, you ain't gonna break my soul.
That's a good
Yeah.
one. Well, I'm with you on it. That's one of my go-tos as well. I really appreciate you so much. Thank you to Representative Crockett, and thank you to everyone who was able to join us for the series with leading Black gun violence prevention champions. The gun violence prevention movement has made huge strides, particularly over the last 15 years. This is in large part to the Black advocates who've been doing this work across the movement for decades, as well as young Black leaders who are stepping up to protect our futures. These dynamic voices come from different sectors of life: public office, arts and culture, business, and faith. Their collective efforts have helped to make our country safer, not just now, but for generations to come. And that's why Everytown for Gun Safety is committed to making sure that we amplify and partner with the Black leaders who have helped shape and grow the gun violence prevention movement and cross movements, not just in the month of February, but every single day, every single year. It's never too late to join us. You can text ACT to 64433 to get connected to your local chapter. And on behalf of Moms Demand Action and Everytown for Gun Safety, happy Black History Month. Thank you again, Representative Crockett.
Thank you.